Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Front Door Show brought to you by Four Fantastic Vets. I'm your host, DJ Beto. And every day, about 8 o'clock, a little, sometimes a little earlier, depending on the guest, we actually go little history level that we're going to be doing. Today, I have DJ Segura, or Louis Segura, as our friends call him. Louis, how you doing, man?
Good, Angelo. How you been, man?
Good, very good, very good. I'm very happy, and not just me, but a lot of people are excited to hear your story. So just that's cool. So what I'm going to do is I want you to introduce yourself. While you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and share it, create a watch party and stuff. It's going live on my Four Fantastic Events business page. So
Okay.
if you want to do that as well, but go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, not a problem. So, hello, everybody. I'm Louis Segura, Chicago-based DJ since the mid-'80s. For the past 33 plus years, I've been sharing my craft through parties, radio, concerts, nightclubs, and you name it. I think I've seen a little bit of everything here. I'm really excited to be here tonight to share my story. I've been kind of a fan of your show, and I've been kind of catching the interviews and a lot of history. I think what you're doing is wonderful.
Thank you.
Capturing all the different eras of music and everybody's stories. Just, it's so funny how everyone's story just kind of coincides. We all met up at some point, and it's so cool to be able to tell my version of it, and it's going to kind of piggyback to other people's stories. So it's kind of cool. I'm originally from Mexico. I was actually born in Guanajuato, Salamanca, Guanajuato. My parents migrated here to Chicago, actually to Little Village in the early 70s. And I'm proud to call myself a son of La Villita. As you know, Angelo, a lot of great DJs, producers, promoters came out of La Villita. So I don't know what was in the water, man. I think something was in the water there. And tonight, my hope with this interview is to get you guys to know me a little bit better as a person, because I know I see a lot of you out in places and stuff like that. So this will be kind of a cool format for that. And then also to help me celebrate the people that really opened doors for me personally, for me and my family, as well as friends that helped in my DJ career. I call them my angels, because there's people that come into your life at certain points, and just makes it a whole lot more interesting after you meet them. And the last thing I want to do is actually talk about music and talk about the era of music that we experienced from yesteryear, which later became kind of a movement for us. And it's amazing that we have this format, this platform to talk about it.
Right. So the first question I'm going to ask is the obvious one. How
Yeah.
old are you when you first started? I mean, like the first time you said, "Oh, I want to pick up a turntable," or or a vinyl, or how old were you when this all happened?
So I think there's two parts to that. So the
Okay.
first part, and it's interesting when you sent me the questions, I'm like thinking I haven't thought about this stuff in a long time. So I'm like, I really got to get prepared for this one, So when you look at it from a music standpoint, where my music origins come from, I come from a very musical family in terms of my mom and my dad. On the weekends when they were cleaning the house, we'd always have background music. My mom would be blasting. I grew up on the first vinyls I remember hearing were my parents playing like Los Temerarios, Los Bukis, Vicente Fernandez, Jose Jose, Juan Gabriel. So a lot of that, was from Mexico. Now, my brother Hector, at the time, he was 5, I was around 7. So we would go through this process, and every other week, my dad would go out and take us to like Kmart and Venture. You remember those stores here? So they had a music section. So we'd get to the store and they'd go out and, do their shopping. And I'd be like, Mom, I'm going to go over there and take my brother with me. So we'd go over and dig our heads in the bins, and we just start looking for records. And around that time, my brother Hector and I were really into a cartoon. I don't know if you recall, but there was a Beatles cartoon on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And that aired in the late 60s and re-aired.
I think it was called the Yellow Submarine or something like that.
Oh, dude, it was like every week they had a new episode. But the best part of the show was they would feature a song, and Hector and I would go to the store and we're like, okay, we're gonna definitely look for that song we heard last week, and we'd look through all the albums, and then when we found it, I'm like, Mom, can you buy this for us? So I really do credit my parents for really encouraging us to do that. That later on led to My brother became a band member. He songwriter, self-taught keyboardist, self-taught guitarist. It took a little more work for me, though. I wasn't self-taught. I had to go to school and actually learn to read and play percussion. I actually been playing the drums since the age of about 7.5.
Oh, wow.
And that's really where we started in terms of where I started in terms of music. But your question wasn't that. Your question was DJing, right?
Well, I mean, but I'm sure the music part of your history is important, because how do you get into the record aspect of it, or DJ aspect of it?
Yeah, and I guess the whole vinyl thing with my parents, and then they encouraged it when they bought us the record. So it was more like, okay, now I started a collection, right?
Okay.
Which wasn't something I could mix, but it was until about maybe 1986, growing up in Little Village, the obvious, as most DJs or Chicago DJs that grew up in the era, we were all turned on to house music very early on. And if you recall, in 85, 86, this is when Trax Records was like cutting edge. All the records were coming out. And of course, the Hot Mix 5 and WBMX featured a lot of this music that was at that time cutting edge. So, that was citywide, right? But then local, we had a little station called WCYC in Little Village. And every Friday night, myself and two other friends of mine, Steve and Johnny, Steve Wild Boy later became a DJ during our high school years. And then Johnny, you guys know him as Johnny Be Good. We all sat on my porch and played my Sony boombox, and neighbors didn't really like it, but my parents always get complaints about us. But we'd listen to the Hot Mix Show on Friday nights, and we started. They were spoon feeding us the music. They were teaching us this new stuff that was coming out in terms of house. And, that I guess intrigued me. I was like, well, how do they mix that stuff? I was into percussion. I like beats. My other two buddies were into music. So we were like all talking about it. And I think it was Johnny's idea. Johnny said, hey, we should go to one of these parties. They're having a BMX thing in Cicero at the VFW. And it's a teen night, right? And we were teenagers, and it was like $5 to get in, $4 with flyer. You know about that, right? And then, so we got in, right? We got in, and man, it was like a packed VFW hall, probably around, I'm gonna say like maybe 250 people, teenagers, mind you. And when we got in, these DJs go up on stage, and it's two of them. There's a big guy, and then there's this other skinny kid. Jumps on his shoulders, starts scratching with a broom. We had heard these guys on the station and through the airwaves, but we never actually saw what they can do in front of a crowd and the way the crowd responded. And we were part of this. So that was the moment when I think all three of us were like, this is what we want to do. We want to be those guys. Those guys just so happened to be Julian Jumpin' Perez and Bad Boy Bill.
Right.
And at that point, then I was inspired. I was like, okay, I got to do this, man. Like, we got to figure this out. I don't know. We don't have any money. We don't know what we're going to do.
Jumping on the shoulders with the broom caught you, right? That's what got you.
Well, that was Bill. And when I saw that, I'm like, this kid is not that much older than me, and he's doing this stuff. It's amazing. So when that happened, we went back to our neighborhood, and we scratched our heads a little bit. Now, this is 1980. We're still in 86. And at that time, Johnny and Steve were like, well, we don't have any money and stuff. Well, what if you buy one turntable, you buy the other, I'll get the mixer, right? That's all we needed. Well, little did we know we were developing a habit to buy records every week, right? But at that time, my dad took me to, because I was responsible for the mixer. He drove me to Service Merchandise. Remember that?
Yep.
And there was this Addis mixer. Do you remember ATUS, Addis?
Oh my God.
Old school mixer. No, nothing on it, but just, levels and EQs and whatnot. And my dad was even like, why do you need this? And I'm like, well, you're going to see, we're going to mix some music. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to mix music on this? Where do you play the music? There was no concept yet developed from my parents about what I was doing. So, I think Steve had the realistic turntable from Radio Shack. You remember the one? The little pitch control thumb? Yeah. And then Johnny had a better version. It was actually not a 1200 technique, but it was like a Gemini turntable. And Steve's dad decided to put together this, we called it a coffin. It was you know, your carrying case.
He built the coffin then,
Two
right?
by fours, yeah, just
Yeah.
nailed them. We put like, I think it was checkered red and black and red, you know, checkered pattern. And we left the equipment would go between Steve's house and my house, and then Johnny would just come over and we would all like practice after school. This happened just after school. We would lock ourselves down there, and as we started collecting music, I think I had like 6 records, and then Johnny had another 10, and then Steve had another 5. So collectively we had 30 records, and we would make mixes out of these 30 records, the same records, and just practice over and over and over. Now, mind you, I think that's where I think we learned how to beat match, because nothing was, the pitches were all a mess, you know, some were 45, some were 33s. So it was a mess at the beginning. I'm going to be honest with you, but you know, it taught us a lot. It taught us a lot about beat matching and about, you know, the skill sets that you need as a DJ, which nowadays it's amazing what the technology has done. And you know, I tell people that story sometimes, and it's like, are you kidding me? You guys, you know, DJed that way? And it's true, it did happen. But you know, anyway, through that, you know, just, you know, DJing through the neighborhood was really cool, because we met a lot of people, and they would hire us for birthday parties and all the different things.
So yeah, I was gonna say, but that's kind of like, I guess so you guys, you grew up in Little Village. What area in Little Village did you guys were at?
So me and my family, we grew up in the, we're on 25th and like Karlov, between Karlov and Pulaski.
Okay.
Right. So we were there. Johnny lived on the other side. He was like near, I believe it was not Ridgeway, but Avers or something like that. And then Steve,
you know, I lived on 26 in Springfield.
did you? You know, I knew you were in Little Village. I just didn't know where.
Yeah, I was on 26, right around the corner from Toto Nico's.
Okay. So you remember all this. I mean, you remember
absolutely.
The neighborhood thing, and you know, it took off with that. And I think one of the nice things about it is that, you know, record shopping, because that was one of the things I mean, I think there was nothing that I have ever been addicted to doing more than that in that stage of my life. And we would go to the flea markets. This is before Hot Jams, guys. This is before Andre opened Hot Jams. He was actually selling records out of his attic and his garage. And we would go over his garage, and it would be like we were dealing or something. Like, you know, I go over there and like, oh, did you get my stuff? Yeah, he'd open it up, and it's like 3 or 4 different records that he had ordered that he knew that I wanted or whatever. And it was so cool, because then he opened Hot Jams, and it became just this huge thing, right?
Right.
But it was interesting how we started collecting music as a DJ group. We named, I think we were called like Universal Dance Productions for a couple of years, and that's when the crazy names came in and all that.
So did you get into just the mobile aspect of it? Was that kind of your first?
Yeah, I think our first gig as a dance or DJ team was Johnny's 8th grade graduation party or something. They had a party at Epiphany Parish in the basement. That was our first gig. And Steve had supplied the speakers, and of course we had the equipment and our regular 40, 50 records at this point we were collecting. You know, we all did a set, and we did like an hour set. And that was the first time we had ever played anywhere live in front of people. And it was amazing, because it was our friends that were on the audience, and they were cheering us on. And it was a very positive experience, if you will. It wasn't a disaster, which, you know, I guess a lot of people, the first time wasn't like that, but you know, that popped our cherries, man.
So what did you guys, at that time, I know CYC was asking people for mixes. Did you end up doing any of that with CYC or anything?
You know, CYC didn't come for me, at least personally, until later down when I got into high school. It was, I believe in 1987, I had gotten out of 8th grade, started high school. Now, if you remember, I went to Bogan, and, you know, at that point, Steve, Johnny, and myself, we had already befriended another guy named George Salinas, who was also on CYC, and he was a good friend of ours from the neighborhood, grew up with us. He was on CYC. He had a show. He had a hip hop, like a rap show. And, you know, he'd walk around with his buzz cut and the CYC jacket. And man, we were like, oh, this guy's on CYC, right? And realistically, CYC for me came about when during my high school years, I went to high school. I was just so lucky. I went to Bogan, and at that year, I think Jesse De La Pena was a senior. Gino Rock and Romo was a sophomore. and Gabriel Guitan Garcia was also a sophomore. So we were all there together, and we were like the Bogan DJs, right? Then you went to Curie that same year, and you had Gabriel Rican, you had Rip the Ripper, and then Quigley South, of course. Johnny was there, Miguel Martin, some of the others. So every high school had their group of DJs, and that helped us grow because we were actually exposed to other different DJs from other neighborhoods and whatnot. So I entered a battle of the DJs at Bogan, and it was like 10 DJs. Everybody represented their class. Gino won the battle, obviously, because he was Gino, and the dude was like, Mr. Speed mixing with stuff. I went up there to battle with New Wave, which no one did. I was the only one that showed up and played Blue Monday at the school gym at 1:30 in the afternoon. And after the battle, Gino came up to me and he's like, hey, he calls me Louis, and still to this day he calls me Louis. And he's like, hey, Louis, you should really hand in a mix, because I'm doing the CYC thing, and they're always looking for guest DJs. So I mean, shit, I grew up on CYC, so I'm like, this is my opportunity, right? So I went home that day, and Angelo, I went nuts trying to put a mix together. By that end of that week, I got the cassette in, gave it to him. About a week later, he calls me on a Tuesday, and he's like, hey, I just want to let you know that your mix is going to air on Friday between this and that. And I'm like, oh, I'm losing my mind. I'm telling all my friends, I'm like, I'm going to be on the radio. I'm going to be on the air. I'm going to be on CYC, and it was a big deal. So that's how CYC became. And shortly after that, Gino, Juan, Magic Juan, and Harv Roman came into my life, all three, and at that right time. And, I became part of the Dominating Six shortly after that.
Right. So, I mean, you mentioned something that was very interesting. Okay. You mentioned you got into house music, but then you're DJing new wave. So how did that happen?
Man, so there was this guy in our neighborhood, Humberto. I'm not going to say last names, but he was crushing on some girl, right? And, I really have to trace back my roots of new wave to him, because he would have he was a guy that drove, like he had the car. He was a little older than us. So he was crushing on this girl who was a goth chick, and she wore black all the time, combat boots, lipstick, you know what I'm talking about. So he'd get in the car and he was all about whatever this girl liked. He's like, oh, dude, you should hear this music. And I'm like, well, yeah, we're all DJs. I'm like, well, let's check it out. What do you got? He popped in a cassette, because he had a cassette in his car. He popped in a cassette, and on the speakers comes this noise I've never heard before. And I was hooked, man. It was off the album Catching Up with Depeche Mode. It was the first time I had heard a Depeche Mode track. And look now, I mean, I've got it all over my house, man. And honestly, it was for me, it was refreshing, because everyone was doing house, everyone was doing classics, right. Everybody was doing high energy. The dance groups were out. That was a big time for that. But then I had some people around, like Jesse Della Pena, the New Division guys were doing some great things, but they were really focusing on stuff on the north side. And I saw an opportunity at that time, and I had the opportunity to work with Pablo Ponca, who's also a north side DJ, but he was on the Dominating Six with me. So I heard what he was doing. I was a big fan of his. I would call his show all the time and request, like, hey, play Camouflage. And, oh yeah, bro, send it out to Lewis on the south side, that kind of thing. And then I'm working with the guy and became friends. And then I was influenced by all these different people at the same time, which was really unique for me, because I got into the music, and then around me were people that were challenging me to do more and more and more. Victor Lua was also part of that. He was the first guy who actually came to my house. I was only 14 or something, and picked me up, took me to my first college party that I DJ'd at with him. And then he takes me and introduces me to Gramophone Records. And from that point on, my musical taste changed a lot. And the collaborations I had from everybody giving me feedback on, you should play this, you should play that. There's this band called Front 242. You should really get into that. So there was a lot of people at that time of my career that really focused on giving me information that they had heard, or they had, heard this song. You had Jesse Della Pena.
You're talking as opposed to just house music. You're talking about.
Yeah. So I wasn't on the DJ team. I was no longer doing house music. I was doing new wave. and you know what 80s stuff mixed in, and
New
then
wave, industrial, you know, like that's
yeah, industrial. I mean, Miguel Martin. After a while, he, you know, I heard of him, and he was doing I think hands down, he's one of my favorite industrial DJs till this day. And don't tell him that.
right.
You know, he knows I love his stuff. But he, you know, in terms of music, I was around a lot of good people that introduced me to this stuff, and you know, and I embraced it. I found 12-inch versions of these songs, and I started mixing them. It was fun.
Okay. All right. No, I mean, because that was interesting because a lot of guys, they were just strictly doing the house or freestyle on in Little Village and stuff like that. That was where I wanted to know, how did you get involved with that edge of it, I should say, because
It was all because of a girl. I don't know. I don't even know who she was. But my guy was like, "You got to hear this," and blew my mind with that music. And ever since then, I've been hooked.
So then, did you, anytime at that point, did you go into a nightclub or did you develop into?
Well, once I got on CYC and I was playing a regular, you know, mix every week, and part of the Dominating Six. At that point, it was like maybe 1987-ish, 88. And Pablo, who was my partner on the D6, he said, "Hey, you know, you should come by this new place. I want you to meet somebody." And I said, "All right, cool." You know, and he and I had been spinning around different parties and stuff together, so we kind of knew what we played, and we heard each other on the station. So it was a Saturday night, I believe. I ended up going to this place on Green Street in the West Loop, and you know, enter Al Cisneros, another one of those pivotal people in my DJ career. So I met Al that night, and Pablo made the introduction, and he's like, "You know, I heard you're doing this kind of music, and we're looking for that atmosphere here, and blah blah blah, and you know, come on and do a guest spot." So I did a guest spot a couple of weeks after that, and after the guest spot, they asked me to remain a part of the resident DJ there, and I was mixing with Pablo every week after that, and it was amazing.
And DJ Tweety?
So no, I was part of. See, Alcatraz had two versions, right? They had the first version was just all new wave, right?
Right.
And then there was a second version that kind of evolved into house and techno and some other stuff. That was later in the 90s. I'm talking about like late 80s,
Okay. So
beginning of 90s.
do you know who I'm talking about, who DJ Tweety is?
Tweety, no. Who?
That's Julio.
Oh God, no. So Julio was actually, he wasn't DJing at Alcatraz. He worked there for Al.
Right. But that's what I say. So when they decided to put his name on there, that was the first.
Is that what they put? I didn't know that. Oh my God. Okay. I'm gonna bust his balls on that one.
So he would tell us in the interview. He's telling you, because yes, he worked there. I guess he was working a coat check or something like that. Or
no, he was. I thought he was security or something.
He was telling us on the interview, and then he says when he decided to DJ, that Al gave him the name DJ Tweety, and I think it had to do with the fact, like Tweety Bird, because you guys were upstairs DJing on that.
That's right. Oh God, that staircase, man, killer when you're lugging around vinyl. Oh man, yeah. But good times there. Al really gave me the opportunity, and I think when I remember that part, and as we're talking about that was my first club residency ever. And Pablo and I.
Al's online right away right now.
Oh, awesome! Hi, Al. How you doing, bud? Anyway, you know, and I'll tell an Al story. It's funny. I got to tell it. All right. So one week, because they gave us a lot of artistic freedom at Alcatraz. Like right. Pablo and I could play whatever the hell we wanted and feed it to the crowd. And if they reacted, that was a song. There was a few, you know, instances where it worked, and there were some that didn't. So one that worked was Papa's Got a Brand New Pig Bag. And the other one was maybe Lambada. That was kind of Yeke Yeke, huge one when we debuted it there. But there was one particular time when I ended up getting, I was part of a record pool at that point, and I ended up getting a 12-inch version of off the album. It was a Cure off the album Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. I think it was like Why Can't I Be You, or one of those songs. I ended up playing it, and it was Too Damn Happy, right? For the darkness that Alcatraz was at that time. And Al comes up there and he's like, "What the hell are you playing?" And I'm like, "This is the Cure. It's new." He's like, "Oh, okay. All right. I won't meddle anymore. Do whatever you're gonna do." And people started liking it after a while. It took a couple of weeks before people danced to it, but it was one of those places where they encourage you to be you. And right. It was awesome to be part of that.
That's what I'm just saying. Al, yeah, Al, I communicate with Al almost on a daily basis because of this show. He loves Al, and Al's been part of this a lot of DJs' lives. You know, he gave,
Yeah.
you know, so it's okay. So you resident over at Alcatraz, and then what happens with you next? Where do you?
So now it gets really interesting because that was busy enough. Now keep in mind I was going to school. I went to school for broadcast communication, so I was in college, and I was working a part-time job, and I was DJing on the weekend every week at Alcatraz. So at that and doing CYC on Friday nights. So
By
my
the way,
schedule.
Gino Rock and Roll was online as well. So
Hey, Gino, how you doing, brother? Um, so it's 1988, 89, and one of the other guys I went to high school with, his name is Diamond Boy Dito. And Dito, he and I had classes together and whatnot, and he starts talking to me about, hey, my cousin's putting together a DJ crew, and it's going to be a new wave DJ crew and a South Side. You know how the guys, Del Pena's doing his thing, and they're all North Siders, and Pablo's North, but we're doing something South, and you should be part of this. So he invites me to go out to, I believe it was like the Days Inn or what? No, Caesar's Inn in Burbank on 79th Street. It's torn down now, but they had a party there, and there I met another person who was extremely influential in my life, who meant a lot to me at that point in my life too, because he gave me opportunities that beyond the Alcatraz thing, and Alcatraz helped, but Mike made things happen with other people. And it was Mike Dynamite Michenne. And he asked me to be part of this DJ group. And I said, well, what are you going to call it? And then he says, well, it's called the Underground Sex Vigilantes. And I look at him like, what? Like, what are you getting me into here, bro? Like, what is this? Little did I know that once I said yes, that would be a brand that I probably still wear till this day in terms of, Sex Vigilantes. And that opened up opportunities for us, for Dito and all the guys. We all played at Medusa's, New Scene, Taurus, Prologue, some other clubs that were just highlighting that genre of music, and it made it extremely compatible. I learned a lot from that because mixing and mingling with people from all over the city who were into the kind of music that I liked, and then with the different atmospheres and different styles of nightclub, we got to learn a lot, man. It was like free school for us.
And that was when you joined this. How many guys were there part of that underground?
The Sex Vigilantes. There were a few of us. It was really just Mike, Diamond Boy Dito. There was another guy. Alan, I think he was on the western suburbs more. Like he wasn't so much in the city. And then myself. So we got to do a lot of that, and we rolled deep. We had a big crew. It was like almost like a party crew without being called a party crew, but that took off because it offered me the opportunity to play some places. Those were probably some of my favorite sets took place during that time. I really missed those spots because there it was all about the music. It wasn't really about who you're there with, what you're wearing, who's doing what. People went there to dance. People went there just to listen to the next record that was coming on. They were really appreciative of innovative music, and I think that that along with Alcatraz, being what it was on its own, I mean, that obviously gave me a lot of credibility with a lot of the other clubs that I started playing in.
Were you there when Al brought Anything Box to the
Oh man, I've got a history with Anything Box, man. I think I'm gonna sign a contract with Claude now to be like the official touring DJ with him. Every time they come to Chicago, we've actually even brought them. My brothers and I have brought them ourselves several times, and I always get to either announce them or I open for them or both. I think it's like 12 times already.
At Green Dolphin, I remember seeing you Anything Box there, and I was there that night and stuff like that. I remember that.
Yeah, no, it's a great show, great band. But yeah, I mean, I got a chance to talking about concerts. I mean, that's I'm gonna do some name dropping now. But there's a lot of people that I've had an opportunity to meet with this world that we were creating, and Anything Box is definitely one of them that's struck a chord with many people. Every time I have several friends that always ask me, hey, do you know the band? I'm like, yeah, I know them. I've talked to them. We're not like friends and talk every day or anything like that, but I know all of them. We follow each other. Whenever they're in town, we hang out. It's kind of cool, you know, and it's a good time, man. It's just, you know, it was a great time to be a DJ at that particular realm of music.
So so the Sex Vigilantes, you're doing mostly new wave, and where does the industrial music happen with this as well?
So several of the guys on the team, I was a blend of everything. I was really synth pop. I was, you know, I played bands like you know, music by bands like, you know, Depeche, of course, Erasure, Book of Love, you know, Camouflage, stuff like that. And you know, Dito was a combination of harder industrial, while Mike was really like Manchestery, very, you know, a blend of industrial as well. So we kind of teetered around each other's style, and depending on who played. I mean, we had a chance to mix at, I don't know, Medusa's in the old days. I don't know if you ever been to the booth.
Yeah.
They had this big log in there, and no one was supposed to repeat music. Like if I played a song, I log it in, the next guy cannot play it. Cannot play it. They did not want you to repeat any music. So that was a challenge for us because we were all playing kind of similar tunes, and we're like, well, we got to get deeper. Now we're going to have to play other stuff by Front 242 or other, you know. So again, challenge. We got away from the 12, 15 records everybody knows.
Right. And then what happens after the Sex Vigilantes as far as going forward? Because this is what, 1980, 1990?
89, 88, 89. So
Okay.
now we're around that time too. So multiple things happened that time. Again, I'm doing all that stuff. I'm part of the Sex Vigilantes. Now I'm doing these other clubs. Now enters, or back in my life, Victor Lua. And at that time, Victor Lua, I think they were in talks, him and Miguel Martin Transit. You know, they were in talks of getting a group together. So Victor, we had you know, I was very good friends with Victor, hung out, mutual friends. And you know, he said, well, we're putting a thing together and it's going to be called the Industrial Network. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. Industrial Network, you know? So I said yes to that too. I'm like, sure, I'll be part of that. You know, if I get to hang with you guys are cool. And, you know, from Victor Lua, I think, again, I opened up my mind a little bit to music, and, you know, he really made it a point to kind of, you know, set that standard that you would deliver on the type of music that you would play, and obviously recordings. We did a lot of, we did cassette series together that did really well at those years. I think we were some of the first ever new wave cassettes that were out. Everyone was doing house and classics and
So
stuff.
you're talking about mixtapes. You're doing mixtapes.
Yeah,
Okay,
cassettes.
mixtapes.
So he's like, let's do it. So we go in his basement. We, you know, old days, you didn't have equipment, you press record. That's how the mix came out. And you go and you press it and you release it.
So I mean, so getting to the mixtape, let's start. Let's just that I know that's a part of it. Was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 volumes? How many? What did you guys do, or did you do it as a group?
I don't know if Vic is online right now. He'd probably know the answer better than I would, because all I remember is that we ran out pretty quickly on the first run, and then we had to go in back and burn some more, and then. I remember this because we tried to save money and we actually did the inserts ourselves, and we're sitting there cutting them, printing them, doing all that stuff manually, and shrink wrapping them and doing all that shit. I'm like, they got people for that now, right? But back then it wasn't like that. You had to work, you know, and put it together. But we made our money off of it, and I don't remember exactly how many series. I think there was like 2 or 3 volumes that we took on. There were different colors. Right. They were like green and pink, and you know, yeah.
All right, so you kind of ventured it, because Pablo talks about his little mixtape that he did and stuff like that, and I think we all kind of went into that route, because as a DJ, that's what we do in Chicago.
Well, it got to the point where you go and DJ somewhere and someone would ask you, "Oh, do you have a mixtape?" I'm like, "No, I don't." So then I had to get mixtapes. You know?
Dude, I remember at Malos. This is true. I used to have I made like what do you call that? Almost shelves with a plastic that I would lock and stuff like that. And I heard the mixtape like over the booth, the DJ booth. So instead of the people coming up and asking me if I'm mixtape, if they walk up to the booth, they see the shelf of mixtapes there. So it wouldn't be, and of course they would be looking at it. And mind you, these were just mixes that I made and then duplicated them. And then I shoved them and I said, Tribal Mix 1, New Wave Mix 1, and you know, and then maybe I had about 20 different ones, but that was because of that always requesting. You have a mixtape. You have a mixtape. You have a mixtape. And but I did not get in because I was where I was DJing at. People just came up and they kept asking me, and it was only one spot I was DJing at Quintu. That was at Quintu. I'm sorry, that was at Quintu.
That's right.
That was their time and stuff like that. That you guys were doing in the 90s. But I know this just if you talk to any viewer, we almost 90% of them talk about them making mixtapes. So it's just part of the culture of DJs in Chicago. We all have been.
You know, the bad thing about it, Angelo, was that, you know, you would go into, and it's crazy how they would take them, right? They'll buy them like legit, and then they'll end up at the mega mall. Like, I remember going to the mega malls and seeing my old cassettes, and I'm like, there's no way I walked in here with these. I don't remember selling them to these guys.
No,
you know,
they duplicated them.
Yeah, well,
especially if the way you said it, that you cut your own and made your own and stuff like that.
Dude, that sucked. Yeah.
So
I need my 5 cents labor.
So I'm just saying. So if you didn't go make them professionally, then it was very easy to duplicate them. Like, well, nobody's gonna know the difference because, and trust me, that I learned that real quick. I'm like, okay, right. I can't do a tape that just looks like I did it myself because somebody else could do the exact same thing, and that's how come they end up in Mega Mall. So.
Yeah, for sure. That was fun times though, man.
So after your industrial network, where did you go from there as far as like?
So with industrial network, again, that opened up other opportunities with other nightclubs and other venues and promoters. So at this point, I'm working with probably everybody. You know, that's one thing I could say about myself as in my DJ career. I don't think I have any, you know, like promoters that are enemies that I pissed off, or I've always been legit in business, and, you know, business first, that's handled. This is how we're going to do things. And we work really well. I work well with everybody. And I tried to stay as humble as possible with it, regardless of what I was doing professionally. And I think that, you know, working with different people kind of developed me that way. I wasn't like, oh, I can't work with that guy, or, you know, I got to compete with this guy. And it wasn't until later on in my career that I had a promoter tell me, well, you know, I'm going to book you, but I want exclusivity. And I'm like, well, that I don't know what that is, man. I work with everybody. You know, I would do 2-3 parties a night, go from nightclub to nightclub to nightclub. And, you know, that didn't make sense in my book. I worked with everybody.
What did you end up doing anything with radio again after CYC?
Yeah, so I did. I mean, radio, I kind of skipped over really quickly, but Harv Roman, I would give him credit, and Magic Kwan for developing the radio personality that I became over the years too, because I took the classes. I went through the classes. I actually, you know, it's interesting. My co-host, who would turn out to be my co-host, was in that same class with me, Alicia Farrell, and Candy, you know, from B96 a long time ago and all that. She was in class with me. So we actually learned. What's that? Michelle. Yeah. Yeah. If you notice, she does some of my voiceovers. So I have the voice drops in my mixes, and it's her. And it's kind of cool because we both had to like learn how to operate a board together. It was really weird. Now she's ends up being on really big stations and whatnot. But I you know, I was more like into the underground scene, and I really liked playing like new wave on my shows, and CYC gave me that platform. At the same time in school, I took radio. So I was actually on 90.7 FM WBHI, the voice of Bogan High School. And I was broadcasting like football games, and, you know, and then I asked the teacher one day, I'm like, hey, do you mind if I start bringing some of my music to play? And he said, sure. So I started bringing Pet Shop Boys and New Order, and, you know, so here's a picture of me behind the board at 90.7 WBHI.
Nice.
Check out the mullet. Pay attention to the mullet, man. I got props, by the way. I started taking stuff out like, what if they talk about this? I got to talk. But no, it was a great time. So my radio personality started developing at CYC. I went to Columbia, so inevitably I end up on CRX for a morning show. Right. And I don't know if anybody's ever done radio before, but to do a 7:30 show, you have to wake up at 3:30 in the morning. And 4 o'clock, you're on. At that time, I was taking the train, so I would take the train to school. Yeah, exactly. And once I got there, I had to be a ball of energy because I'm the morning guy. It was called the Wednesday morning rush. So I had like 7 cups of coffee. I'm wired up and playing house music for the Northsiders and the student body. It's a lot of
So
fun.
any awards with the radio?
Yeah, around that time, there was not a DJ union, but there was a collaborate that was made with a lot of the promoters and a lot of the people that were talking, doing all the nightclubs, and they came up with what was called the Chicago Dance Music Awards, and it was around I think 89, maybe 90. I was not even out of high school yet. I remember that, and I ended up being named the radio DJ of the year. And that's because I was at these different radio stations and, doing all this stuff. So after that, it kind of spiraled into hosting. And, we want you to announce a band and we want you to introduce a band. And so that kind of took off that way. And that part of my career also developed.
Well, wasn't if I'm not mistaken, that was a union of people that would vote. Am I
Yes.
correct? From different from
It was a
industry.
peer. Yeah, it was a peer thing. So your own peers would vote. Yeah. And it was
Right,
kind of
right.
cool to, I don't have an award hanging anywhere or anything like that. It was just a nomination that was given and it was a prestigious thing they put on a flyer. And I wish I kept it, man. I'm so horrible at keeping any old stuff. I'm glad they came out with a book with flyers. I got to buy them because I never kept anything. It's terrible.
Oh yeah, we like I wish there's a couple people that I know had flyers, and I just posted one of my old from 1986, and I was like, what? I have forgotten about that. Even battle of the DJs, So there's and obviously we don't look at things like, oh, I should keep this for history purposes and stuff like
Right.
that. So you don't look at it like
You don't
that.
look at it that way. When you're living it, it's not
Right.
movement. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and there was no Facebook back then. So
Oh no, very different times.
so after the didn't the new wave industrial underground, or should I say, I call it underground in a sense because it was a little under.
That's what it was back then. Yeah, you're right.
It didn't become sort of the rave movement. That wasn't that the whole aspect of it.
Yeah, so they started doing events, industrial events and underground events that they called, with new wave and with techno. So that was around the techno era that started popping up with raves. But there were a lot of promoters locally that were doing that rave type event, like at factories. I remember going to factories, not knowing when the party, where the party was, and you did the whole driving around, and finally you get there, and it's like, yeah, you're on in half an hour, and it was just a bunch of people dressed in black, looked like vampire cult there. It was crazy, but it was cool because that era also became kind of the rave scene for Chicago. I know once the Midwest raver stuff came out, that's completely different. But there was for at least a year and a half, I remember being booked at these events. I had no clue where I was going until the day of, and it was interesting because all I knew was they wanted me to bring vinyl. And one time I showed up and it was a sponsorship one. Can't remember what soft drink sponsored it, but you know who the headliner was, and I was opening for him. I had no clue I was doing this. You remember the song James Brown is Dead?
Yeah.
LA Style. I opened for them without knowing I was opening for them. I show up and I'm like, and I was with George Salinas at the time. We walk in, it's like death in there, like it's dark. It's it's horrible. And
you think in the movie Blade,
like that, exactly. When I saw Blade, I thought about that. You're absolutely right. So that happens, and then it's like, yeah, just don't play. They told me don't play LA Style. James Brown is Dead. I said, well, why not? I got it in my set. It was popular back then. And they're like, no, don't play it. So they come on, they start dancing and performing and lights. I'm like, they never told me this? I'm like, it's cool. It's a good time.
Right. So after the rave scene, where do you
Right.
go from the rave scene? Where does your, that's in the early 90s, mid 90s and stuff like that. So where are you going as far as, I mean, you're just playing spot, all these.
Yeah, man, I was probably one of the hardest working DJs out there. I mean, I was doing probably 3 to 4 events a week, and on top of going to school, working, and it was burnout haven for me. I mean, I was really just about music. Now, mind you, around this time, and I'm gonna call them out. I have to. So Bobby Martinez and my brother Gabriel and all of them, I'm going out. I'm doing my thing. They're back at my place. They're back at home in my house, going through my records and they're practicing to become DJs. Okay. This is around the time I wasn't around. I was always
No,
busy.
you,
So
you know, no, Bobby had mentioned that.
yeah.
Bobby,
So
Bobby,
I'd come home the next day. I'm like, where the hell is that record? I can't find it. It was misplaced because Gabriel was using it or Bobby was using it or wherever.
yep.
So, but that's how they started DJing. They would like mix off the stuff I had there when I left. So it was interesting. But I was really busy. I was going back and forth from venue to venue and working with a lot of good people at that time. I think the radio part. CYC kind of ended for me in the right after high school, probably about 92, 93. I think I left CYC, and I would go back every now and then, do a guest spot or something like that. But I missed it. I mean, I really did miss being on the radio.
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think being in the genre you were in, or the scene you were in, you had an advantage over a lot of the other DJs that were going on. That's why you were working so much, because it was a specific, there weren't a lot of clubs that were doing the new wave. So if there was a place doing it on Wednesday, that was the only place. On a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, or Sunday, so you were booked at every place that was doing it.
You're
So
right. No, that had a lot to do with it.
yeah,
Sure.
so you that's why you probably were working so much, because of the fact that yes, there's one spot, but guess what? That's where everybody is for that. For
You're
that job.
absolutely right. And it created a movement. It really did. Like, at that time, a lot of people were getting into the music and they were demanding more acts. They were, I remember doing a set with Pablo. Pablo actually threw the event at the Apollo 2000 right there on Cermak.
Right.
And he brought Cause and Effect. And, we had a great show. We DJ'd, I met the band, which is a huge thing for me. Meeting these guys in person, because I played their music all the time. So I was like, wow, I'm a fan, man. I mean, I'm starstruck when I meet people, and I've had an opportunity to do that. And I think, during that time, those different venues, and you're right, this movement, people were asking for it. I mean, people were asking for bands to come to Chicago and do a set and do a show. And it was awesome because you had a group of people. It went from me playing that music, and I remember getting booed off a stage at the Highlanders Hall, like back in 1988, when I was playing Depeche Mode's Behind the Wheel. And the promoter's like, what are you doing? What are you playing that garbage for? You can't play that here, And I had like 3 girls dancing. So then I figured it out. I'm like, if I make the girls dance, the guys are going to follow. And if the guys follow, there's a movement there. So all the DJs who were doing that at the time were being experimental with it to get people to dance and to get people to understand that there's more than just house music, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, our roots are house. That's where we came from.
Exactly. So during this time, if I'm not mistaken, because Julio talks about it, that there was how that movement, and then there was a Spanish rock, Spanish pop movement happening at the same time. That was it seemed to gel, at the same time, and that kind of helped also, because and technically, let's put it this way, a lot of the new wavers were Latinos as well.
Yep. Especially here in Chicago. Yeah.
Right. And then Julio was telling me that, like on Oak Street Theater, that was when that was where, where him and Frankie V and stuff like that. And so the whole V5 aspect, and that was those. So how did that blend in with you guys?
So Frankie V, another guy that I attribute credit a lot for what I became, right? It was like maybe 1999 at this point, and Eddie Reyes, the Rebel Reyes, approached me and said, "Hey, Frankie V." Now, mind you, we had already been going to his events. We were going to V5 events all the time, and because you're right, I mean, I was into Spanish rock myself, and I was like, I'm gonna go check out. I don't want to DJ tonight. I'm doing this. I'm going out. Where am I going? A V5 event to hear, Paulina Rubio remixes and stuff like that. I was a fan. So I get a call from Eddie and says that the Franks were going to put together a new club, and they didn't want to do Spanish rock at that time. And I was like, oh man, I get a chance to play Spanish rock, right? because they had, biology bar and some of the other some of the other places. My sister's house, 720, whatever it was called. I don't know. I mix them all up, man. It's been so many, but I had the chance to be a resident DJ at Voyeur. That was my second club residency, and Voyeur was on Ohio Street off of LaSalle. And I was there for a couple of years. Now that was a huge school for me, and enter V5 now, right? The V5 era for me.
Mhm.
And yes, I was V5, and to prove it, here you go. Yes, that's ramen noodle hair right there, yellow, baby. The 90s, okay? The 90s. I'm forgiven now. So the main DJ there, the head DJ was Martin Boogeyman Luna.
Right.
And Martin, I mean, talk about this kid from Little Village meeting a person like Martin. I was a huge fan of his. And I'm like, man, this is Martin Luna, damn, So as I got to know him, the coolest guy ever, down to earth. And he kind of took me under his wing at the club and says, you got to do this and do it. Look at the crowd. And I really learned something different than what I had at Alcatraz. Because at Alcatraz, we were able to do whatever we wanted. And we were actually teaching people about music. Here, I got this guy, senior DJ, who's saying, hey, this works, this doesn't work. He was a club DJ, and it was a very different thing for me. So that challenged me a little bit to become a little, to the evolution of me, right? To get into tech house and to get into different things that I wasn't doing before. And kind of, he taught me a lot, man. Martin taught me a lot in those years. I was there for about 2 or 3 years with him.
Right. And then because of Voyeur, I think that was their pseudo club for not being convent, or
Yes.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It was their, okay, this is my the other personality we are.
Right, because they had Diablo and Rick Guerrero. They had them at the other places. Rick Guerrero was like their all-star DJ for V5. He was at Biology. I think he jumped around, like in the night he played like at 2 venues.
Right.
And then Diablo did Biology and Convent, which was massive. I got to play there once. They actually gave me a shot there with the kind of music I had going, the tech house, kind of progressive house. And it worked at Convent. I got to play there a couple.
It obviously worked. And ironically, while you guys were doing all that, I had Palladium and I was dealing with it because everything, and I, again, I said it to my interviewers as well, and we talk about that, is that you guys were dealing with a college crowd. It was
True.
20 and over crowd, and I was dealing with the teens, because I was at Palladium and stuff like that. And I always tell, and I used to tell to Frank about it. I go, listen, I'm not your competition. I'm
Right.
setting these people up for you later on.
You're setting them up, right? You're the next 10 years of security.
Right.
Yeah.
Until we opened 720, then they all came to me. So,
That was it. Yeah, exactly.
that was, and that was kind of forced onto me as well. So that's another story. But I mean, so you're basically are dealing with a young Latino college, and these are young professionals now.
Right.
And we can even talk about that. Like these were like you were from Mexico, and then you're here growing up in Little Village, and you got a college degree, or but this was a lot of the same crowd you were playing to, were a lot of the guys with first time having an email.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, or that's when the clubs were all let me get your email address, and that was all college emails.
That was the name of the game, to capture emails. They even hired girls to go around with notepads. Remember that? I'm sure you did it too.
No, dude, I had my daughter working for me, collecting emails at the door. Oh yeah, here's a little 14-year-old kid. Oh, it's Prieto's daughter. Oh, yeah, I'll give you my email.
Yeah, I noticed that because all of a sudden they were like, you get an unlimited guest list. Just get me the emails.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
And I turned in like a 20 guest list with emails, and they were theirs at that point.
Yeah, it was like, okay. So I mean, but it just there was a movement that was happening especially in the Latin culture, and it was the young professionals, and they were second generation Latinos that were coming in and stuff like that, and they didn't want to listen to grandpa's or my uncle's music, and they wanted to listen to basically their own music. And that was what everything you were playing, the new wave, the Spanish rock and stuff like that, and it worked out perfect. So you DJ for Voyeur. What happens next for you?
So Voyeur was a whole different thing. I got to meet a lot of people there too, that kind of helped me get into at that place. At that point, I was playing tech house and kind of progressive techno, different things like that. I played a little Euro. It was the 90s, so forgive me for that, hence the yellow hair. Um, and then, got into a lot of that. And, that opened up an opportunity for me to reunite with some of my friends from childhood that were also doing their own thing. So Johnny B. Good at that point had kind of done his DJing thing during high school, kind of came out of it, and I kind of pulled him back in. I said, no, you're not retired, man. Not yet. We're not done. And George Salinas, he's Soul Pimp now. He's a DJ called Soul Pimp. And he, all three of us grew up together. So we collaborated on a lot of remixes and production work. And that opened up a lot of other opportunities for us because I, at that point, had never been outside of the city of Chicago to DJ, but that changed after the production and the remixing. We were sharing, collaborating with people from all across, and in those collaborations, we had the opportunity to get booked. So I played in Las Vegas, I played in Los Angeles, I played in several cities around the country, never overseas. That's still on my to-do. Damn it, I'm gonna be 50, I'm 47. I got 3 more years before I get to overseas, but I'll get there.
So I guess the question is, when you say remix and production, was it studio work that you were doing?
Yeah. So artists from around the country would send us their vocals, and they'd be like, hey, we want you guys to do remix work. And we would do that. And even though it didn't get picked up or it didn't get, played in terms of, global expansion or distribution, we had the opportunity to work with all these tools that we didn't have before, technology. And, we had all the audition stuff, the editing work, all that stuff. So at that point, till that point, I was playing vinyl, and Johnny and I were like, well, dude, it makes no sense anymore to play vinyl. So switch gears, came into CDs, and CDs became the MP3, and the MP3 easier to edit and much, faster. And now it's unbelievable with the technology that's out there for DJs now.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. Where was your involvement from? Because a lot of the stuff was coming in CDs instead of vinyl and stuff like that. So you start off vinyl. What year was it that you kind of converted CDs? What year did you convert into MP3?
Oh man, so I was one of the last of the Mohicans, man. I held on to the whole. I was like Gino. I was playing vinyl till the bitter end, until I think it happened around the Voyeur days when, because Martin played vinyl at Voyeur, and he walked in with his 17 cases, and I walked in with my 3 and stuff. And, it got really bad because sound was all off. It wasn't wired. There was a lot of people that were dancing and moving the turntables, and all that started happening, skipping. And I'm like, I got to do something. So Johnny turned me on, and he, in terms of music, and said, you need to make the switch, man. You can't play vinyl anymore. It's not accessible at the club. So the club started replacing it with CDJs and, later on USBs and stuff like that. So the technology, in order to keep up with it, I tried it all. I tried the Serato. I tried everything else. I tried the laptop DJing. For me, I feel comfortable. I'm manual, I'm hands-on. And I stuck with the CDs. I do my own stuff. I burn it, and it's on CD. Even as late as a couple of weeks ago, when I did the Dominating Six thing with Gino at his place, he was like, you should really try doing USB and doing the software and this and that. Now, this is a guy who's retired, who doesn't DJ anymore, but now all of a sudden is live streaming, and he's all like, he caught up. I'm like, dude, I'm so behind. I need to catch up again,
Well, once you do it,
yeah,
it becomes like, Jesus Christ, this is so much easier. I should have been doing it, and then the technology is you can do the remixing right there.
Well, cue points. He's showing me cue points, and I'm like, dude, you're using this like live. I'm like, I do my own remixes. I get them how I want them, then I play them. Like.
right.
I don't know. I guess it's cheating, but it's not, because you're at home and you're actually working on the stuff, right? And you're remixing and editing and doing.
And hence the hot points that you had, the cue points, the hot point. So that's what I'm saying. It becomes you're creating your own remixes and stuff, and you're doing you create it on a spot per se. You're creating the So that's the advantage of having the MP3s or doing that
Absolutely.
You know that they have the vinyl. controllers as well, so that
Yeah.
so you can still do all the same stuff.
No, you're right though, because I played at Harvey's with Jesse Della Pena. He had a rewind thing there at Harvey's a few years back, and Harvey's DJ booth is like this big. So there was two turntables, the mixer, and his laptop. And he's just bring your USB drive. I'm like, all right, cool. I showed up with my music, plugged it in, and I'm DJing on vinyl again. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. It feels like vinyl. It is vinyl,
It
it's
is
pretty
vinyl.
cool. Yeah. It's just weird. It's just, it messes with you when dude, I was mixing on a realistic turntable when I was 13. It was
So let me guess. You're playing the vinyl and you're looking and you're turning around to look for the.
a few times it happened. I'm like, where's my half crate? I know I have that record in my half crate. It's not there. It was funny, but you know what? It's funny you say that because it did happen to me. And you're so used to it. You're so used to the vinyl and you feel it's different. I can't explain it. Unless you're a DJ, you'll get it.
Trust me, I'm watching Victor, and he's like, I see him like, okay, where did I put it at? I don't know. He's like, he's getting lost. Sorry, Victor, I was watching.
Oh, Salazar's doing fantastic. The dude's playing like every night.
Yes. And he's a big fan of the show as well. So he's huge. He's on here almost every. In fact, he's on right now.
Awesome. Great job, Victor. Keep it up, buddy.
Yep. Absolutely. So do you do any other of the, are you strictly doing underground scene now? Is that what
well, we kind of talked about Boyer, and the next stage of my life was my last and final club residency. I had the opportunity back in like 2008, 2009. I was working with Trudar. They were doing some different events. We did juniors and in Pilsen, and then he started doing events at Neo. I got a chance to play there. And before Neo shut down, that was awesome. It was always like on my to-do on my bucket list, and I got it off before it closed, so I'm happy about that. But then I got presented the opportunity to play at Exit, and Exit was a punk bar. And at that time, they didn't have they had a dance floor and everything, but there wasn't a scene for that. So the Trudar guys started it. Eddie Riot then picked it up, and Eddie Riot said, hey, we're going to be putting a night together. It's called Subculture, and it's a new wave 80s night. I'm like, that's right up my alley. So what he did, and Eddie's vision was really cool, because he actually got like me for the Southside guys and people. He got Kamar, who was a resident DJ at Neo, to play on that night as well. And then Leo or Akira, who's also a Little Village guy. I call him my protege, man. He reminds me so much of me when I was young. It's crazy. But he ended up playing on that night too. And we're all collectively different genre, new wave, but different new wave. And collectively, it became an awesome night. And it took us a few years to build it up. I was there for about 6 years at Exit.
Oh, wow.
And, that was my longest residency. And it was great. I mean, I learned a lot there too. I got to meet a lot of people, gave me the artistic freedom that I needed, as an older gentleman. And, a few years ago, about 3 years ago, I think it was a little bit over 3 years ago, I ended up making a decision not to continue there. It was my decision. I talked to Eddie and I'm like, hey, I think it's time. I've been here 6 years. People would make fun of me like, oh man, when you die, man, we're gonna have your wake here and we're gonna put you up in a DJ booth, and because I was getting to that point where it was like, and quite honestly, I'd get home at 6:30 in the morning. My little guy will be up at 7:30 wanting cereal. I couldn't do it, man. Age caught up with me, and I'm like, you know what? I think this is the right time to do it, and I just walked away from it. I hear they're still doing events and things are going on there, and Subculture is actually still going on till this day with other DJs. But it's awesome. And now before pre-COVID-19, I was being very picky on where I played, and do fundraisers and special events. Concerts have always been my thing for the past 3 years. I've been doing concerts a lot.
Well, that's because your brothers started.
Well, that helps.
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
because, and especially your brothers doing that style of concerts.
Yeah, my brothers is a whole different show, man. They did what I didn't want to do. I stuck to the DJing, and they took the business aspect of music and just, you know, they're doing some great things. Both of them, they're doing some wonderful things. And I think that you know, and that's another show you might want to log in with Gabriel and Octavio on that. That'd be interesting to get their perspective on things. But you know, all of it is related in terms of the concert series. Yes, there was a lot of opportunity for me, especially when they were doing new wave events, you know. Because of that, they put me in front of the right people. So I mean, not too many DJs can say, new wave DJs can say, okay, you know, well, I've done opening sets or Anything Box, Red Flag, When in Rome, Can, you know. I was there at the right place, the right time with the right people. And I think the biggest aha moment for me was when I finally met like Front 242 and Netzereb, man. That was amazing. By the way, go ahead.
I was going to say, but you know, I bet. My question is, what about the guys right behind you? What as far as Depeche Mode?
Oh man, that would be. I have a friend that I went to high school with. Rachel, you're out there. Pablo, they know who they are. They got to meet them a few years back during a meet and greet, and you know, I got the pictures, and I'm like, oh, like that's one band that I don't even know what I'd do if I met them. I'm like, yeah. But the biggest ticket, and I have, dude, I'm a fan. Like every time I play for these guys or I do an event and I get the chance to meet them, I'm that sucker with the vinyl. Like I have vinyl signed by all these people that I'm mentioning right now, and I keep it. And I'm a sucker. I had to kind of retire the vinyl. I never play it again. I'm like, it's signed by them. So the biggest ones I've got, well, in terms of concert, you know, I got the call from Joey, actually set that up. Big guy Joey ended up setting it up for me, where I got to open for Erasure when they came here to the Congress Theater. Pablo, myself, and Mr. Wonderful were part of that. And it was an awesome day. It was just an amazing moment. And to be on a ticket with Erasure, I mean, I'm like, okay, great. You know, I'm accomplished, like off the bucket list, right? But then the biggest moment was when I met Thomas from Daft Punk. And Daft Punk, dude, like 3 years later, they're Grammy winners or award winning, you know? And it's so cool because they're French, you know, and they start talking to you, and I'm carrying the vinyl like a dumbass, right? I'm like, hey, can you sign this, you know? And he's like, oh yeah, I know. Well, the conversation was that I was the only guy at Lollapalooza that year, that at the Daft Punk concert, with a 4-year-old on his shoulders, because I took my daughter and she was a huge Daft Punk fan. So I got her the shirt and everything. So she's there and she's chanting it. So I took the record so that he can sign it. I told him that my daughter likes them, and he was like all talkative with me, you know? And I'm like, all right, cool. So he signed everything. So those are probably worth some money now, you know? But I'm a sucker for all that stuff. And yes, you're right. Meeting the right people, you know, through my brothers or through other people. I mean, like Pablo and Al and all these people that came into my life at that time put me in front of these people. So to that, I am indebted to them and for the opportunities.
So I remember seeing you DJ, correct me if I'm wrong, it was at Neo. I think it was because Marco Hernandez had set it up. I think it was a Monday night.
Might have been.
It was for Conrad's birthday.
Tuesday. It was a Tuesday night.
Was it Tuesday? Conrad's birthday?
I remember that because I'm like, Neo on a Tuesday? What about Thursday? No, that was a hot night. But we did it Tuesday night and it did really well. Yeah.
And I remember it was Conrad's birthday and I was there, and then I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. And I ran into so many of the guys I knew. I was like, oh, I was by the bar. Obviously, I wasn't DJing or anything like that, but everybody walking in the place I knew.
You know who else was there that night? Danny the Wild Child.
Yes, he was.
Danny was there, and I hadn't seen him in years. I mean, the guy's touring everywhere. And he comes back and I'm like, dude, what's up? You know, how you been? Oh, dude, we start talking music, and it was just a really good night. It was a good night.
And Marco invited me. Marco Hernandez invited me. Marco, you know, and you know, Marco's been involved in everything that we, this industry.
The sound guy, man. I always think of Marco as the sound guy. He's just the sound guy. He's a DJ, obviously, but he's also the sound guy.
Right. So, I mean, especially over at Green Dolphin, he was doing a lot of the.
That sound he had going at Green Dolphin was probably one of the best sounds I played on.
Right. It was incredible. And so I guess the one important question is that, did you always was it always Luis Segura that was your DJ name, or did you?
Well, I mentioned Universal Dance Productions back in '86, and back then we were getting creative with our names, and you know, it was Steve, Johnny and Louis. So Steve became Steve Wild Boy E, and he took that on. And may he rest in peace. We lost him several years back, but he's one of those guys that just had an impact on me musically. Johnny, we had a hard time naming him because I had just watched Back to the Future and heard the song by Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. And we're sitting at a park and like, well, Johnny, you should just call yourself Johnny Be Good. And I kidding around, he liked it. He's like, I like it, and he saw it with the B and the dat and the good. So he ran with that and he calls it, everybody knows him as Johnny Be Good now. I was for a minute, for about a year and a half, since, and the guys helped me name it. I didn't come up with this name. They named me. I can't remember who it was, but because my blending style is usually about a minute long. So I don't go like slap-ins really quick or anything like that. I like to blend my music. You won't get anything less than 45-second blends from me. So they were like, oh, you're the master of the hot mix and hot mix and hot mix. And all of a sudden I became Hot Mix Louis for like a year and a half. And it was not resonating with me. And then finally, before CYC, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna drop this. I'm not gonna be no Hot Mix Louis. I'm just gonna call myself what I am, or my parents named me, and I followed up with the name. And now I guess it backfired on me a little bit because I'm in the business world as well on my personal side. I'm for what I do for a living, and it's funny because I'm at a closing or something. I'm a mortgage broker, a mortgage banker. And every time I'm at a closing, I have an attorney or something, they're like, Louis Segura, are you a DJ? And I'm like, oh. I'm like, then I have to do that was part of my life. But it's crazy though. It's a cursing and a curse and a blessing, right? A blessing and a curse.
Well, I mean, at least you're recognized as, you're recognized. So I'm sure that helps in the business aspect of it because you're just.
Well, yes and no, because there's some people that don't know that I do anything other than DJ. I think they just they think I make my money just DJing. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes. But that takes a lot of risk. Take it from me. That takes a lot of risk, Well, let's trial and errors. And there's more errors than trial.
Few people have done it well. I mean, we talked about Bill and how his influence, and he had some words of wisdom over my career as well. Got to know him a bit after, and I told him the story, like, hey, I got started in the industry because of you and Julian, and we saw you, and he's like, oh, dude, that's so cool, And one time I remember I asked him for some advice because I was my brother had just passed in '95. I took a year off from DJing, and I really was trying to find something to keep me going in terms of what's next for me, right? So we went to the Winter Music Conference. George Salinas, myself.
And I was just going to ask you about that, the Winter Music Conference.
Went to the Winter Music Conference like in '99 or something like that, and it was before then. And Bill was there, and everyone was like, "Bad Boy Bill, oh my God, Chicago!" So they've heard we were from Chicago, and they thought we were as big as Bill, and they were all talking to us and whatnot. And Bill and I had a moment there, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, I'm kind of hitting a wall as a DJ. Have you ever been through anything like that?" And he says, "Man, I do it all. It happens to me all the time. But you just got to keep playing what you like. Keep playing what you like and who you are. Identify with the music that relates to you." And I although I knew that, hearing it from him for some reason, just kind of, it clicked, and I'm like, okay, cool. So then he also told me another bit of advice was, don't see yourself as a DJ. See yourself as a product. You're selling a product. You're selling a brand. And how are you going to brand yourself? So that opened up my mind to another way of seeing myself. And I was kidding around with my girlfriend the other day, because I'm like, I don't DJ as much anymore. And, it's a good thing. I'm happy. I really am. I balance it off. And when I can, I do it. And I get asked through the reunions and all this stuff. It's awesome. And I look forward to it again. And, we were kidding around, and I'm like, I'm nostalgia now. I'm like the old guy, right? I'm like that vintage guy that people like, hey, I grew up on his stuff. And, and I'm cool with that.
Hey, be careful when they start calling you the legend. The legend.
No, oh, dude. Oh, when people call me that, I'm like, I'm not a legend. I'm just a collective of people being in front of people at the right place, the right time, that opened up opportunities, and I try to appreciate that every time I get a chance to play. And really, I hope that now during this interview, you guys have seen that I'm not, we tend as DJs to have egos. We do. All of us, we're narcissists. We love it, but if you stay humble and you stay focused on the task at hand, which is making people dance and entertaining, man, everything else falls into place.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's we get paid for doing what we do, but I think our drug is seeing the people happy, people dancing, and we're like, yeah, that's it right there.
Dude, that's why you have all these people live streaming now. I mean, look at all the DJs that came out. I mean, there were some great talents out there. Man, we really do have a lot of great talent in Chicago, I'll be honest with you. Beside the people you and I know, all the new guys that are out that are doing some great things, the graphics, the sound, just everything else that they're doing. It's just amazing where it's going.
Well, that was kind of my I guess the reason why I decided to do the show. I mean, honestly, that was like, as we talk, I says, yeah, people get to hear you DJ for 2 hours, but do they really know you and know your background and why you're doing what you're doing and stuff like that? They know of you, but they don't really know you. And that's why I did this show.
Yeah.
And lastly, I guess the first question is, do you remember the first time we met?
That was one of the questions on there, and I'm like, I want to say, I hope I get this right. It was, you were DJing at 720, I think on the first floor.
Okay.
First floor or bottom floor, one of the floors. And the guys had booked me to DJ on the second or third level. And I had finished DJing and I hung around. And that's when I went downstairs, and I think we met through the Franks. One of the Franks introduced us. Am I wrong? Or did we meet before that?
I think but Frank wasn't there. That wasn't.
No. It was one of the promoters that was there that booked me at the same time, because I know you were doing stuff, but you were also DJing.
I want to say it was because now was this before they closed or after they reopened again?
Man, I'm terrible with dates when it comes to nightclubs.
Your brother used to do stuff there every so often at as a promoter. He would do it so often, and I don't think any of the Franks were there because they were in convict already.
They were your competition.
Right. Because
That's right.
That was Ed Tunney. But that was part one. And I think you're right, because that means that I was playing on the first floor, but I wasn't DJing with him on Fridays and Saturdays. I was DJing on a Tuesday for him.
It might have been on a Tuesday. I don't remember.
And I was doing that was pre-Tuesday Night Boxing, because that was Tuesday Night Boxing. That was in like 93, 90, 91, 90, 92, 93, because when I did the Tuesday Night Boxing, or let's say the idea of the Tuesday Night Boxing, the first person I brought it up to was Ed Tunney. Ed Tunney said, absolutely not. Big mistake for him, but then I brought it to Tropicana / Palladium, and that's and obviously we're doing it there. So I think if that was us to meet there, that would have been on that Tuesday, because I was DJing for him on Tuesday doing the salsa night. I was salsa night, but I think they had something else going on the top floor as well. He was trying to do a couple things. It wasn't just salsa. I remember I was DJing on the first floor, and I remember that
I do remember that. Yeah,
it was the first floor, and he had something. I think what he was trying to do is, and I think probably you were playing upstairs on the second floor. I think he was trying to do something different, and that might have been his aspect of trying to not compete with Friday and Saturday, what was done.
That might have been it, because I was hired at the time. I was playing like more progressive tech house, and they hired me to do that, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'll do that.
Right. So I think that you're right. That would have been like I said, 92, 93 ish.
Yeah. But I can't remember if I met you before. I'm sure we ran across, because we have a lot of mutual friends. We have a lot of mutual friends.
Oh, Jesus Christ! I mean, we talk about Johnny B. Good and all everybody. I mean, God.
Well, I
Yeah.
know I've been to your place when you were over at on Randolph, Alhambra. We
Yes.
stopped
Yes. Yes.
we stopped there a few times for you. Actually, Johnny and I were texting today. It's been a while since I connected with him, and he's like, "Hey, you're gonna be on with Prieto? You know, tell him I said I miss his salsa nights at Alhambra because he and
Yeah.
I used to stop by and pregame there."
Yeah. That was. Well, I mean, Tuesdays has been doing it there for 13 years, and then I don't know if you remember, I started with Marco at Green Dolphin.
That's right.
That was what on a Tuesday. We
That's
were doing
right.
a Tuesday, and then even that we did it on a Wednesday. We kind of switched over to a Wednesday over there. But I think that was the time that you were working. Your brother was doing stuff over there as well.
Yeah.
That was kind of that whole, and I think that's why I was there at the Anything Box concert, because I remember talking to you out in front, and I don't maybe it was Anything Box, or I know it was an alternative. It was an
Book of
alternative
Love,
group.
maybe. I did
Maybe,
Book of Love
maybe,
there too.
I think it was Book of Love. I think we were there, and I was always hanging around with Marcos. I was always
Yeah.
hanging around with Marco. Marco and I were always hanging out together, and I
Great guy,
remember,
Marco.
yeah, and I just remember us talking, and I think I remember you being on stage, you announcing them, and doing that, and I was like, oh, okay, this is because it was Gabriel's show. I remember it was your brother's show, and I was like, okay, cool, because when am I going to see an alternative group? Unless I go see Depeche Mode, which I did go see.
I mean, it's amazing to me how many people go to a Depeche Mode concert in Chicago when when all this started, this craziness started. People weren't really into this music. They were like,
Well,
I've heard every name called of that music before.
well, that's how I got involved into Spanish rock. How I fell in love with it, because
Amazing.
when I went to go see Mana, I was like, oh my God, this is the Depeche Mode in Spanish. That was,
You're right.
and then to see all the women, that was what
Well,
that helped a lot. Okay, I like Spanish rock. There we go.
and you became a Spanish rock DJ.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I started getting the music. Oh, trust me, I was like, I need to learn this all, And then you just like start absorbing, and burning
Yeah.
CDs and stuff like that. But I mean, I know it's a little past the hour. Any last words you want to say to all the audience that has logged in here?
Well, obviously, I just want to say first, thank you for offering me the opportunity to be on the show and to talk with you, tell my story. Hopefully, people got to see another side of me and another side of what the music represented. Like to thank all the people out there, parents, my family, for putting up with all the loud drumming and loud music all the time. And for all the sacrifices that were made, because my family sacrificed a lot for what I believed in. Girlfriend Jennifer was putting up with my crazy ass. Now I'm doing all this live streaming too on Periscope. You can catch my live streams on there. And she puts up with it every 2 weeks. I have like blasting music, and keep in mind it's pretty hard to be with me, right? Of course, everyone who, I can go on and name everybody, and I'll name a few that just, made an impact. My brother Hector, Steve, Johnny, George Salinas, Al Cisneros, Pablo Punca, Frankie, Eddie. I wrote down a couple names here, and every promoter. Thank you guys for booking me. Thank you for believing in me. The Dominating Six, Gino, Harv, Magic Juan, Victor Lua, Jesse De La Pena, everyone who really supported me and believed in me and trusted me. And then above all, the devoted listeners. I think that without their want and need for the music, and they continue to embrace it over the years, kind of gave me that drive that I looked for. And even when I gave up for about a year, they were still there. And it was awesome to have all that back and embrace them again. And obviously, who's to say that we're going to be able to do this live again anytime soon? But I'm excited to see what happens. It's a new book, a new page in the book, right? We're writing history right now. And I think just a message to all the DJs that are streaming and all the new DJs that are out there, continue writing this story, because this is just the beginning. This is like part one of a book that that's thousands of pages long, and you guys have this opportunity. It's your torch now. You guys get the chance to do it and continue on the path that that we were privileged to start. Right.
Right, I agree. I agree 1,000% on that because we didn't have. I mean, I predate you by almost 10 years, but in that aspect, let's look at the DJs. When I was doing it, we had an obstacle too. It was called disco at the time, and then the anti-disco movement and all that
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
and,
man.
and we had a big obstacle. So yes, so if the new DJs right now, this is considered an obstacle. Trust me, we survived the anti-disco anthem, and we continued it on, and we will survive this as well. So it's
Yes, we
not
will.
gonna. So good talking to you.
Good talking to you, my friend. Take care. Stay healthy.
You too.